I'm going to tell a very, very personal story. And my story has to do with the power of perspective and how the perspective of something can really change your motivation and how you do things. So I'm going to start by just saying that the shift of my perspective in this particular situation changed my life forever. And it produced my son, who's the greatest motivator I have. So this power of perspective and the shift of perspective was so important to me that I thought that you might find it interesting. So about, 14 years ago, I discovered that after separating with my son's father that I was going to have a baby. And that idea came about with a lot of fear, a lot of worry, and mostly with the idea that I was going to be alone. So, alone was the word that kept going through my head, right? Self-talk. I don't know anybody doing this alone. Alone is difficult, scary. Alone. So my entire self-dialogue in this situation as a single parent, becoming a single parent, was about being alone. So this is how I felt. I was terrified. And being a parent in general is terrifying, but on my own, I was very, very scared. So I was alone and scared. I felt isolated. I felt like the only one who was doing something like this. I was really, really struggling with the idea that I had to do this alone. So there I was, pregnant, alone, having a child. And I thought, okay, where do I go from here? So I did what I always do when I'm struggling. So I talked to people. I went, actually in this particular case, I went to see a therapist. And I said, okay, I'm alone. I'm going to be alone, having a baby, and I'm scared. And she said, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself. So I started with my story, where I grew up on a ranch, like Yellowstone, with cowboys and Indians. My mother's a Native American, and I had to do chores on the ranch. I took care of horses on my own. I had to take care of fields on my own. I went to school on my own. I did a lot of things on the ranch on my own growing up. And when I was 16, I decided to move alone and on my own to Holland. So I went to the Netherlands. I studied in the Netherlands on my own. I lived with a family that had a baboon, which was kind of odd. So that's another story for another day. But I was on my own there for a year. I didn't have a program. I didn't set up a program. It was an exchange. It was just me on my own in Holland, and I went to a school, and they had me teach. Then, after that, I came back, and I decided when I was 18 to go to Costa Rica on my own. So I went to Costa Rica, I studied Spanish, I traveled, did quite a lot of things, discovering on my own the country and the language and the culture. Eventually, at age 20, I moved to Spain on my own to start a new life. Have not gone back since, so I've been in Europe for about 30 some odd years, do the math. So I did a lot of things on my own. And what I realized when I was having that self-dialogue about my life with the therapist was that there is a very big difference when you're looking at the word alone and motivating yourself and self-talk. Alone is very scary. Alone is isolated, it's lonely. It really interferes with how you motivate yourself, right? You say, I'm alone, I'm doing this alone. It's a very frightening place to be in. And it's seen in its connotation by society as being a very, very scary thing. So I had to shift my perspective. I'd listened to myself talk about all the things I had done on my own and thought, wait a minute, that's different, right? If I'm not thinking of it as being alone, but I'm thinking of it as being on my own, I have a very, very different approach to how I want to do this, right? So I started thinking about that, what I had done on my own. On my own had a very different feeling. To accomplish something on my own felt powerful, it felt strong. So then I shifted from sort of the dark place of being alone to the light place of on my own. On my own, I was going to be a super mom. On my own, I could be really strong. I could be confident. I could be capable. I could do lots of things on my own. I'd done lots of things in my life on my own, and I'd been very successful at it. On my own, I was going to have a baby. So I know a lot of you haven't had a baby. You've probably not experienced single motherhood. So I'm just going to relate it to you in maybe a different way. So imagine you're on a trail in the woods, looking up at a mountain that you're going to climb, and you're alone. So you're alone in the woods. What do you think? Usually, alone in the woods in all the movies meant that you were in a scary place, that there was danger, that there could be scary animals, you could get hurt, what would happen if you twisted your ankle. You're thinking, how am I going to do it? Am I going to make it to the top alone? Lots of real negative self-talk, right? It's not very motivating. But if you look at that same scenario and you think about it on your own, you're already starting to think how it can empower you and what it would feel like to hike down that trail and climb up that mountain. And when you get to the top on your own without any help, you feel proud, you feel pride, you feel accomplished. So just that simple perspective of changing the dialogue in your head from being alone in the mountains and in the woods to on your own really provides you with even that motivation that you need, slightly more than when you're thinking about it on your own or alone. So what does doing it on your own really mean when you're accomplishing a task or when you're trying to motivate yourself? So it's motivating in and of itself when you're looking about doing something on your own. You're learning something. I think Hilmi just said earlier, when you're starting a new task or when you're looking to accomplish something, it usually means you have to learn a new skill. You have to overcome a challenge. You have to learn how to do something you didn't know how to do before. When you're doing things on your own, you build resilience, right? So sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed. You try again, and eventually you make it and you're becoming more and more resilient every time. Pride. Pride is huge, right? You're so proud of yourself when you've done something on your own. You feel really accomplished and happy with what you've been able to do. Freedom, of course. Freedom of having been able to do it without necessarily getting any other support or feedback. And then, of course, independence. You feel incredibly independent when you've been able to accomplish something on your own. So think of another story, for example, a child who's learned to tie his shoe, right? So first of all, children are already self-motivating, right? Me do it, I'll do it. They'll tell you that all the time. If you've ever seen a kid, they'll tell you a million times they want to do it. When they're doing that, they're learning, right? So if you're tying your shoe, they had to learn how to do the bunny ears or around the corner and under the woods or whatever it was to learn how to tie your shoe, but they had to learn the new skill. Then, of course, they probably failed a couple of times, but they just kept going. And eventually they would learn how to tie their shoe. And how proud they are. Have you ever seen a kid who's done anything on their own? My God. Mommy, look, I did it. They're screaming, they're shouting. They're so proud of themselves when they've done something on their own. And of course, it gives them freedom. Freedom to explore other things. Freedom to do other things. And independence, so they don't have to ask their parents every time they want to tie their shoe. So on your own, and telling yourself that you're doing something on your own can motivate you, give you lots of other kind of background and skills and resilience and pride and freedom and independence to keep going and doing other things. So now what? This is my son when he was little. So now what? So I'm going to complicate it a little bit more now, though, because now that I've got maybe some of you to think that doing something alone versus on your own can make a big difference in just your self-talk and your motivation. Hopefully I've convinced some of the individuals here that that's possible. But I'm going to complicate it a bit more. The original Middle English word of alone actually means al one, which is all one. So the original definition of alone actually meant wholeness. It meant independence. It meant whole in oneself. It meant completeness, self-sufficiency. It was a really positive word in the past. Medieval days, a knight would say, I'm going to go alone into the woods, it meant he was going to go hunt or kill or survive. He was going to do something accomplished. Alone was a really positive term in Middle English in the past times. It was only until like the Romantic period, when there was a lot more somberness and people were melancholy and talking about love, that being alone was seen as being really negative. And we put this negative connotation on the word alone. And what I'd like to do as a society is to move away from the fact that alone is a bad thing. Because actually, if we change our perspective as a society on the word alone, it gives you that whole and complete and fulfilling feeling, right? I mean, it shouldn't be a bad thing to go to a movie alone or set out on a project alone or sit at home and watch Netflix alone, right? None of that should be negative. But somehow as a society, we've really made the word alone a very negative thing. And it's actually on your own. It means the same. It means that you've accomplished something, that you've done something, that you've been able to do it. So it's self-sufficiency, inner strength. I mean, there's so many positive things about the word alone that we just don't associate as a society with that word. So as an overall sort of feeling and roundup of that, I would say as individuals, we could start by saying, instead of I'm doing something alone to motivate yourself, you could say I'm doing it on my own, which is hugely much more motivating. And as a society, I'd like to move more towards this definition of alone not being so negative. Because I certainly didn't have any problem on my own delivering my little baby on December 4th, 2010. And I haven't had any issues on my own or alone raising him now. It's the light of my life, fantastic kid. So my sort of message to everyone is an overall feeling at the end of this, is that it's about perspective. So you change your view, you change life. As individuals, we can change our self-talk and motivation from alone to on our own. But as a society, I think we need to start looking at what alone really can mean and how it's an empowering thing. It's self-sufficient, it's strong. And there's a lot of things we can accomplish and motivate ourselves to do alone as well. So that's just my perspective on the topic, and I hope that you got something out of it as well. Thank you.